Hello and welcome to another episode of SyrupCast for the week of August 20th, 2015. It is hot as hell outside. And as always, I'm joined by my coworker and good friend and good-looking man in general, Douglas Soltis.
The
What's
heat
up, buddy?
is too damn high.
Too damn high. The rent. Too damn high. What are you drinking?
It should be Bullet, but it's just Jameson.
Mm.
A little Thursday afternoon pick me up.
Well, my pick-me-up comes courtesy of my I Love Netflix mug.
Oh, nice.
Which I brought back all the way from Barcelona.
What?
Yes, sir.
You bought a Netflix mug from Barcelona?
I did not buy one. I was gifted a Netflix mug in
at the Schmobel Congress?
The Schmobel World Congress. Netflix actually rented a beautiful flat somewhere in Barcelona and shepherded journalists there to show off their new mobile interfaces months before they were actually announced in public. So I couldn't say anything about them for like 4 months. It was crazy.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that they should have a mobile congress in Barcelona.
It's
no reason other than it's just beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's warm in February. It's awesome. It's also very unsafe. My buddy Chris Velasco got all of his stuff stolen at a McDonald's right across the street from the Fira Gran Via, which is the main convention center there.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. It's all good. He got his stuff back. So
what?
Sorry, he didn't. What am I saying? He got his passport reissued.
Ah.
That's not at all what I said, actually. So
yeah.
Disregard everything.
I was like, let's stop the podcast and hear that story.
Let's talk about I'm gonna say his name wrong, but Valenzuelas, who just got signed to a 4-year, $64 million deal.
Valanciunas?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I haven't said his name for a few months. I always said it wrong during the season. Valenzuelas. What's up?
My name is Jonas.
My name is Hove. All right, so yeah, let's talk about it. What do you have to say? Worth 64 mil?
Yeah, you can't teach big. And I know that the game's going to all like fast and quick switching and stuff like that, but JV can put the ball in the bucket and he can rebound. And if they actually let him play in the fourth quarter and learn what that's about, maybe he will be useful in the fourth quarter. I think a lot of his developmental issues have come from a general disdain amongst the team as to what JV brings to the table versus what he's taking away from the table. And I think he's got a much shorter leash than someone like Terrence Ross, who, other than scoring 50 points and running around like an oiled gazelle, doesn't really do much. So
didn't Ross get traded?
No, man. Unless like the coma I've been in for the past week, I missed something, but no, Ross was not traded.
That's too bad.
My man Grievous, though.
Maybe
Swaggy
that's what I'm thinking.
Never forget.
I like basketball, but I'm not very familiar with a lot of it. So you're basically my teacher. So let's talk mobile because that's why you're probably all here.
And you're my teacher.
This has been a really busy August. Let's just talk about that. So we'll start with the big topic that we missed last week, which was Google is now owned by Alphabet, and Alphabet is now run by Google's former CEO and president. So other than the business implications, which, you know, as a holding company, basically controlling a bunch of smaller companies the way that, say, Berkshire Hathaway does, Alphabet seems to be a way for Google to justify its many different projects. So Google is its main company. It'll continue making the vast majority of the profits and the revenue, but its other endeavors are becoming increasingly important, especially around the healthcare and the robotics side of things. And we're seeing projects like, that diabetes-focused contact lens that allows you to check your insulin levels, and a lot of other kind of longevity projects with Calico. There's There's a bunch of really cool stuff.
There's the balloons, the giant balloons.
The balloons, the internet balloons. The name I forget. But they're doing some really interesting things, and you can't really call Google a search company anymore, because even though that's what they do to earn money, a lot of their pet projects turn into these really big endeavors that end up changing the world.
No, sorry, wrong. You can totally call Google a search company or an ad company, an ad search company. It's just that that company is no longer dictating where the monolith goes. So if you look, comparing this to Berkshire Hathaway or even just a normal corporation, which a lot of people think of large companies, if they've never worked at one, as like a single entity, when really there are a lot of different silos, a lot of different small fiefdoms, a lot of different, 50 to 100 person companies working together. And the thing is, with a company like Google, whoever is working on the Team Balloon probably doesn't care about what Team Diabetes Contact Lens is doing. And Team AdWords doesn't give a damn about anything, because they're the one that brings in the money. So the opportunity for all of these different ideas to exist as their own functional company means that there's no brilliant idea that will live and die in middle management because it's just being thought up by someone in the wrong division or someone who doesn't have the purse strings. I think with this organization, what Google's founders are doing is giving all their moonshots the opportunity to thrive and grow on their own with the, independent monetary support of their major profit maker, which is Google.
Yeah.
And I think that, two things to think of when this news comes out in the past week. You get the one story where some guy from Kodak invented the digital camera in the 70s, and his bosses told them to hide it because they were afraid of disrupting their own business. This is the type of decision that they're protecting against, and then you see all this news about ATAP getting delayed, which will be something Google no longer has to kind of really justify and hide, so that each of these things can be addressed and grown and tackled separately.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So Google's the breadwinner, Google brings in the money, and Google allows these other outfits to run, the same way that a big director will, take a Spy Kids 7 in order to, Robert Rodriguez will direct Spy Kids 7 in order to fund his independent, gory country movies. So, that's something that I've always admired about Hollywood, is that, the big name directors really don't, I mean, some of them do, but most of them don't just want to direct crap. They want to direct.
They do car commercials or Halo commercials. That's what they do.
It's funny that Ridley Scott is directing The Martian, because I think that, he's one of those big name directors who doesn't do a lot of small budget movies, but when he does, obviously The Martian's not one of them, but when he does, they turn out to be, surprisingly good. And there's another movie coming out by, Steven Spielberg, directed by the Coen brothers, with Tom Hanks in it, that about a Cold War spy exchange that looks amazing, but doesn't really have the big blockbuster special effects that a Jurassic Park or
any of them joining the Avengers, because that's how you make money nowadays. But then even just being glib about that, that's the idea where you don't have people who are looking to build something that will be amazingly profitable in 20 years trying to justify their spends to people who are responsible for optimizing every second of search information day to day on a website that, from a fundamental experience hasn't really changed much since 1990. Was it we want to say 98, 99 when Google dropped? 97 maybe? 98, 99?
I think it was, I think they just celebrated 20 years, didn't they?
Yeah, not 95.
Close enough. Anyway, I mean, they've been around. Sorry, it's not. What are you talking about? 20 years. It's been 11 years.
11 years?
2005. Yeah. If you go to abc.xyz, that's what they have this letter written by Larry Page that goes over why they decided to create Alphabet. Anyway, what's so interesting about this is that Sundar Pichai is now the CEO of Google. And Google is this massive company, right? And Pichai has basically come up from middle management to lead Android and then lead so much of the device division, so much of, he basically controlled Motorola when it was a part of Google. He runs Android, he runs Chrome, he runs all of the, consumer facing products.
Okay, so that's interesting. So with all these companies breaking out, Android still remains a part of Google.
Android's a part of Google. YouTube is a part of Google. That's not going to change anytime soon.
It's all about the ads.
Yeah, and those are ad driven, and it makes sense to keep Chrome and Android and YouTube all in one place. Even though YouTube has its own CEO, it's under the auspice of Google.
It's just another search engine.
Yeah. I guess that's true. And then, we have
second biggest.
And then Google's broken out parts of Android into fully fledged products too, right? Like, or Google Plus used to have Google Photos, but Photos is now its own product. And Google now has the potential, especially with Now on Tap coming with Android M Marshmallow, which we'll talk about later. That has the huge potential to disrupt the way that people use their smartphones, or it could be useless. I mean, who knows? But let's just give kind of quick acknowledgement and move on, because that's a big deal, but we don't really know what's going to happen with it, especially in the mobile space.
I think it's mostly a big deal for all the things outside of what we normally cover.
Which I want to cover.
Yeah, but unless Sundar really does something crazy with the Google as we know it now, I think it's more about the other things that were inside Google that are now no longer. Unless we want to talk about that Wi-Fi router that they released.
Yeah, OnHub. So that turned out to be one of the most popular articles of the year on Mobile Syrup. People seem to love the idea of Google creating a router. Now, that's probably because most routers are god-awful. But I also just think that Google has a way of curating certain categories of products, like, the fact that they bought Nest, and then Nest brought Dropcam, and now Dropcam is integrated into Nest. Google has these like Apple does, has these disruptive powers that allows them to take an existing category of product and then rework it into something special.
Well, so also, if in the way that you would trust Google with your fiber optic cable or things related to data speeds, you would trust them to make a router that isn't brutal 90s tech in a plastic box. And I think we were talking earlier in the week that the promise of this is that it's also taking in mind the capabilities of mobile, so multiple device kind of handoff and things like that. So if, for example, you're in a coffee shop with 15 laptops and 7 phones connected, it's something that the router can handle rather than, crapping out and the barista has to go over, unplug and plug it back in again. Right. But it's interesting how willing people are to now give Google their deeply personal information at the IP level. Screw a Google account. It's just literally from your connected devices.
Yeah, the privacy implications are interesting, but more interesting is the fact that people don't really care as long as they get a better experience from it.
Well, so we've talked very long and hard about the idea of, with Google Photos, Google knowing too much about me because it knows a lot about you and we've shared moments together. But that's with like a fairly intrinsic social connection and profile to your Google accounts, or at least the information on your phone that you share to your Google account. Now there's the capability to just like have detailed information about the people around you just because you're somewhere, based upon what, you know, data connection you're all accessing at the same time, which like all the like question all the data at like at the pipe level, you know?
So Google's hedging that discussion by not building the device itself. Google's actually partnered with TP-Link, which is a well-known and very reliable router manufacturer. And by not being the hardware builder and by leveraging mobile, you know, with an iOS and Android app as a way to merely control the I/O of the router, you have to, I guess, take for granted that this is not Google looking for more customer information by plugging directly into your internet connection. This is them just using their established platforms as a way to better serve its customers, right? So you could be cynical about it and say that, yeah, they'll be logging certain data points from, you know, how many devices they use, to how fast their internet connections are, to their ISPs, to things like that. But at the same time, like with its ad data, it's all anonymized. It's all basically just thrown into a mixer, and eventually out comes some better ways to target ads. So,
well, it is, except for when it isn't, right? Except for when they want to provide you more information about you, which means that they can pull together information about you when they want to, right? And then I honestly don't believe, like, if we were talking about them laying like their fiber project, and like basically we make money when people use the internet. The more that they use the internet, the more money we make. So we're going to make sure that regions that don't have high speed internet get them. I get that as like a fundamental enhancement to their core services and money making. We're talking about routers here. There's like, routers are not so bad that Google needs to come in and supply routers for people so they can guarantee, you know, internet access. I think it's naive to think that they're just looking to jump into this new product category to better serve their customers.
I just completely disagree. I mean, I would argue that it's far more innocuous of Google to release a router, especially, it's basically just a rebranded TP-Link router with some mobile apps thrown in there, than literally laying down fiber for people in Kansas and letting Google be their access to the internet. I mean, Google already runs a DNS. They already have, you know, tons of influence when it comes to the routing of traffic on the internet. Being the destination, or being the mediator between your home internet connection and your ISP, doesn't give them much more power than they already have, because most people already use Google's DNS services. Most people already use Google as their primary search engine. Most people, you know, have some sort of Google account that they access on their iPhone, Android, or Windows Phone or BlackBerry. You know, this is a company that is entrenched in people's lives already. Adding one more factor, you know, by inserting a piece of hardware between their ISP and their modem, I don't think that's going to make a big difference in the long run.
Adding one more factor can change the capabilities for them to contextualize the data by like a factor. Like, and I think when you're talking about the device level, you're talking about at like the pipe level. I would say at the router level, the thing there is also analyzing multiple device connections, which means triangulating not just your usage because you're doing it in app, but the people around you while you're using that. So where you're gathering that information from.
Right. But okay, so say that everybody in your apartment building, you know, when you, like, if you're in a busy apartment and you pull up your Wi-Fi, all the SSIDs on your laptop, there are dozens and dozens of them, right? All those routers, all those modems, all those, you know, they're usually connecting to one of two frequencies. It's 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, and one of maybe 4 different standards, which is 802.11g and AC, or, you know, if it's really old, B, and one of 2 ISPs. In Canada, it's Bell or Telus or Rogers, depending on where you are. So one of 3 ISPs. If Google could convince people to get the same router so that it could tune the channels correctly based on, you know, presence, so it detects other routers with the same, made from the same manufacturer. It knows what, you know, what frequencies they tend to run on, what channels they tend to run on. If it could optimize that and make everybody's internet better, just so they could show me a targeted ad, I'll take it. I mean, if that's the worst case scenario, that my internet, I don't have to reset my router every day, that you and I have more stable podcasts because, you know, God forbid I forgot to unplug my router before we started podcasting, I'll take it.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think that would be the worst case scenario. And I also don't know what the business case would be for them to work that hard just to be able to serve a better ad. I just feel like there's more, our capacity to speculate and imagine the usefulness of big data is limited by our feeble, unevolved human brains. I just think that there's, you know.
But you also, I mean, I always notice when you and I talk about this, that you find some way to argue that basically every company has a sinister side to their intentions, especially Google. That you feel like ultimately we are going to, you know, as consumers, we're losing by giving up more of ourselves and more of our access to these companies. And I understand that argument, but at the same time, I just don't see how inserting this router into your workflow does anything to you know, leave people worse off than they were before.
So I have rarely, if never, argued that it's a sinister intention for these companies. But I strongly believe that in most cases, the stated reason for why a company does something is not often the real reason. And usually that real reason relates back to how do we make money or make more money. So in the case of Alphabet specifically, you know, I'm sure that Sergey and crew are really concerned about, you know, how do we effectively manage a massive company? Well, let's have a company of companies where we help manage and mentor strong CEOs and work with them to do visionary things that will keep this company that we've started with, you know, a search bar into something incredible. The unstated reasons, which are probably true, are they're probably really bored of search and ads, and they want to do cool and wonderful big shit. So doing this puts them in a position to work on that while making sure that the money still comes in. They also probably are tired of public markets and investors giving them a hard time with these moonshots. So this is a very easy way for them to say, quit worrying, Google is still super profitable. You own shares in super profit, and here are the other projects that we're working on, and we're only going to share financial information on them when they're successful. Otherwise, they get bracketed into this kind of like miscellaneous section. So they don't come out and say that. It's not stated, but I think it's obviously an intention beyond what they wrote about in a blog post. So yeah, they can talk about providing like a better service to customers accessing the internet, but like the inherent drive of capitalism is not to be that gregarious.
They're not being gregarious. They're not being benevolent. They're not being magnanimous or whatever other huge adjective you want to use. They're trying to make money selling you hardware. There is
that high profit.
There's always money in the lemonade stand, right? Like there's always profit in hardware.
Yeah.
Right. The margins in something like this, if they're selling if they're selling a router that costs them $40 to make for $250, they're going to make money. That's how these things work. They bought Nest not because they want to mine your data. They bought Nest because building a Nest is not that expensive, and they get to sell it for $250.
Well, okay,
right?
So would you consider that the cutthroat router industry to be as profitable as something as like home connectivity? Where we're talking about things that people buy once and then replace only when totally broken or when they switch internet providers and have to give it back. I do not think that they're like, oh wow, we can make a really great margin on routers. Let's move into that. I completely agree. It's profit.
That's why they're not building it.
Where's that profit coming from?
But it's similar to the Nexus line, where they get to stamp their logo on it and control the user experience.
Yeah.
Right.
But the whole point of Nexus isn't profiting from the device; it's profiting from the propagation of Android.
Right.
And making sure that no OEM owns the identity of Android. So again, hey, we want to have a really great core Nexus device. What's the real reason? We need to keep these OEMs in line. we need Samsung and HTC to stop dirtying up our core Android experience, because consumers just want stock.
If that was the case, then they would stop Android. They would stop Samsung and LG from dirtying up the Android experience. They're perfectly fine with Android being different on different devices
to a certain extent.
They want to. It's like they're setting up the platonic ideal of what a router is. They want people to know that there's something better out there. Even if it's just to challenge companies like Netgear and Linksys and D-Link to develop better products, they'll do it. Just like they developed fiber to the home in certain parts of the country, or they want to challenge the carriers with Google Fi because they want to lower prices, because they want to make it a more compelling experience for customers.
Well, that's interesting what you just said there. So the fact that they're challenging the internet providers, which in the US are even more kind of ingrained and monopolistic than in Canada. So I saw one tweet today where the analysis of this launched. They were saying that basically Google was able to sneak in, like to backdoor a router in right under like Comcast's nose, which is I find to be very interesting. And I would think that would be a more compelling reason than them just saying, like, I don't think even when Google makes hardware, it's not about the hardware.
Right, but Google doesn't make hardware. They've never made hardware.
So even when Google sponsors, supports, partners, purchases hardware, it's never about the hardware.
Well, that's not true. They did make Chromecast. I mean, they do make some hardware. Anyway, I mean, I don't think you and I are on two different sides of this, but I do think that you and I have different opinions on what Google's end goal is. And I do think that with something like the OnHub, it's not to mine your data. It's to make sure that people's internet is better so that they can get better ads, that they can more reliably use their home internet with more devices in order for them to integrate more Google services into their lives. And if, the setup process says, hey, it would be way better if you had a Google account, to Grandma Joe. Hey, we know that your grandson bought you a router, and it would be great if you had a Google account.
Set up your family router with set up a family Google account for your router or your set-top box or your home. Yeah, I think all of that. But that goes beyond just like, hey, we can build a better router, right? It's access to services.
No, but it's not. I mean, you're basically saying that they can't do one without the other. Like their intention could be multitudinous. It doesn't necessarily mean that they just wanted to create a better router because they were being benevolent. And it's not that they just want to mine your data. It's that they want to do all of those things.
Yeah, okay. But like, I'm sure they don't want to be like, hey, we want to build a really shitty router, or like, we don't care if we build a good router. I'm saying Google never takes a step into hardware unless there's something else to it. They're not just interested in building a really great piece of hardware.
Sure. But I mean, the Nexus, like, what your argument would suggest that buying a Nexus phone then would allow Google more access to your life than if you bought a Galaxy S6, right? That you're giving them,
it comes preloaded with a lot of Google services that aren't competing.
So does every Android phone,
but not competing with any other Android manufacturer's phone. And anyways, I'm well on the record, like on this podcast, for like the stated reasons why Google even started the Nexus program. But I know, like, we got a lot to talk about, and we just went really deep. We went from A to Z on Alphabet.
Yeah, we did. Well, that's why people listen, because they like those deep dives, and they like the fact that we always go at each other's throats.
Like that, we should post the Giphy that we slacked right before the podcast started, which is basically how we prep for these podcasts.
And you gotta.
This podcast is fire.
So, let's move on to talk about Bell. Now, Bell just launched their tri-band LTE advanced service in 4 cities in Canada: Toronto, Oakville, Halifax, and I believe K-Dub, Kitchener-Waterloo. Now, tri-band means that it uses 3 LTE bands to get speeds up to 290 megabits.
Whew!
Now, obviously, you're not going to hit 290 megabits.
Oh.
But what it allows you to do is use your the best phones to get the best service in certain parts of the country.
Yay! Now, okay, my question is, will any Bell customer or potential Bell customer go to Bell because of this? Or will they just kind of like implicitly know that, like, yeah, Bell's network is the dopest because it's wicked fast. There you go.
Yeah, it's not about stealing customers. It's more about checking that box so that Bell can say they have the fastest network in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you see all over their marketing, that they are the fastest LTE in Canada. And back in, I believe, like 2011, 2012, Rogers had to change their marketing from the most reliable network in Canada to Canada's reliable network. Because Bell and TELUS kept on saying, that's not true. You can't prove that you're the most reliable network.
Yeah.
But when it comes to speed, it's much easier to say, we hit these speeds and our competitors don't.
Totally.
So we're the dopest.
But in a market where everyone kind of has their little catchphrase where they're Canada's most whatever, how much does that speed resonate? Like, do we think that the average consumer can comprehend, like, okay, yeah, they're the fastest, or like, holy crap, that's really, really fast. I can basically stream whatever I want whenever I want it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or because, like, how does a company like Bell take advantage of winning this kind of arms race?
Well, the advantage is that they get to partner with companies like Samsung to develop these kinds of technologies and launch them in Canada. to set precedents for the rest of the world. Now, we are, you know, Bell, on the one hand, isn't doing this like Google doesn't do things to be gregarious. They're doing it to tell investors that we hit these benchmarks in Q3 by being the first to do X.
Totally.
And it allows us to do X. So, for example, you know, with so much bandwidth on a phone like the Galaxy Note 5 or the Galaxy S6 Edge Plus, they get to say, we have these amazing big screen phones that get to stream, you know, eventually it'll be 4K video or whatever. Right now, it's just the highest quality video, you know, on Crave TV. So, you know, they get to say, we own the content, we own the pipe, we own the relationships with the manufacturers, and we own the claim that we're the first to do this. So when they launch, you know, some great new service like Crave with some exclusive content like The Wire, or maybe something more modern like I don't know what's
his new show with that guy,
Game of Thrones. Like that. Let's say when Game of Thrones comes to Crave, they'll be able to say you can stream the highest quality video with our new service, and it'll never buffer and blah blah blah.
Dinklage better, faster.
Yeah, Dinklage's pores will be more easily, you know, distinguished on that beautiful 5.7-inch display.
Okay, I can kind of buy that. So how many phones right now can take advantage of this in Canada?
2.
Which phones?
Well, right now none of them are on the market, but tomorrow they'll be there. The Galaxy S6, or sorry, the Galaxy S6 Edge Plus. I hate that name so much. And the Galaxy Note 5. They are the first Cat 9 capable phones to be sold in Canada.
That's sexy. That's better than Super LTE Advanced Turbo Championship Edition. It's like, yeah, we're Cat 9 capable. It sounds like a Star Wars squadron. Cat 9 to Cat 4. This is Cat Leader.
Except
now,
Cat 4 is like all broken and dirty and probably got run over by a bunch of...
Its astromech droid is just like... As I have a Rogue One background.
I feel like if we get into Star Wars K-hole, it will be very clear very quickly that I know nothing about the universe, and most people will just lose all respect.
You're not a Star Wars guy?
If they haven't already. It's not no, I'm not a Star Wars guy. I'm not as big into Star Wars as a lot of my like heavy geek friends. I'm more of a Star Trek guy, but even then I really, it's like very surface level. I didn't really get into the whole star, you know, culture.
So you're not trekking or warring or
like I don't know if this is heresy, but I think Star Trek First Contact is the best movie. Let's put it like that. Like I love First Contact. I think it's a great movie. I don't like the original Star Trek. I don't like the... So 2 Samsung phones are coming out tomorrow.
And you've been spending some extended time with them, periscoping and whatnot. With this extended time, have your thoughts changed ever so slightly?
Wait. Hang on a second.
I'm just trying to save you from the internet, man. I'm just trying
I really don't give a shit. If like it's not like I'm saying that Star Trek Nemesis is my favorite movie. Like let's be clear. First Contact is objectively a good film. Like there is no question that of the Next Generation era Star Treks, it was the best.
It's the only one with Guinan in it.
It had Borg. It had time travel. It had drunk dude. What's his name?
The guy who invented the warp drive, even though it was kind of secretly Geordi now.
What's his name? I want to say William Hurt, but it's not William Hurt.
The actor or the character in the
actor?
Oh, who cares? It has Whoopi Goldberg in it and Picard going Die Hard on the Borg. I get you.
Totally. Anyway, so yeah, I'm not going to apologize for my my love. Anyway, I have been playing with these devices. They're awesome. They're really good, and actually a lot faster than the Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge. Now, that's probably because they're running Android 5.1 out of the box. And as we learned with every phone running Lollipop, the early versions of Lollipop, the performance wasn't really up to par with the features. So Google did a great job kind of overhauling the look of Android, but the early versions of like Android 5.0.2 were just crazy buggy. So Lollipop is better now with 5.1. We just got the update on the HTC One M9 today, which I just updated, and it looks good. Most big flagships are updated to 5.1, except for the Galaxy S6 for some reason. I'm not sure why. So this one is definitely a big update, and it's a great phone. The Note 5 is probably becoming my favorite Android phone.
Really?
Yeah, it's super fast. It's really got an amazing camera, beautiful screen. The S Pen is a big update over the Note 4. The form factor is a little bit sleeker than the Note 4. It's actually smaller overall than the Note 4. I like the curved back. It's not slippery. What else? The fingerprint sensor is fast.
There was a lot of commentating in the office that it's not as big as a phone that big would feel. Like it doesn't seem as big as it is.
Well, the bezels are shrunk, so it's not about that. It's not that it feels smaller than a phone that size would be. It's that the phones that size were too big because of the bezels before, whereas now this is basically as small and as compact as you're going to get in a 5.7-inch phone without cutting off the home button.
Gotcha.
So should Samsung down the road decide to make a 5.7-inch phone without a home button, which I don't think it will for the foreseeable future.
But then where would their wonderful fingerprint sensor go?
Well, that's the argument, right? We wrote an article a couple of weeks ago about how Apple's been looking into integrating the fingerprint sensor into the screen itself.
With the force touching.
Well, yeah, just with having the fingerprint sensor be all over the touch display, all over the digitizer, basically. So it'll be you'll be able to sort of authenticate just with touching your finger anywhere on the screen, which sounds really cool.
So it would Nate Best is wondering, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, when we were talking about the Note 5 announcement, you had initially said, still sticking with my Note 3, totally happy in the comments on that post. So interesting, in the chat, you're asking now, is the Note 5 a reasonable upgrade from a Note 3? Daniel Bader.
Yeah. Huge upgrade. Like, just from the screen alone is a big upgrade. The camera is a big upgrade. The processor is a huge upgrade. This new Exynos processor is crazy, crazy fast. Got 4 gigs of RAM, much better build quality. Everything you would expect from a flagship has been updated here, and it's expensive, but it's well worth the cost. It's about $360 on contract.
And you like the back? You like the back casing?
I like the back. I also, I know this is controversial, but I don't really care about expandable storage because I think that Android treats expandable storage like a second-class citizen.
Like herpes. It treats it like herpes, like it's trying to get rid of it.
It tries to get it out of there. And there's a reason the Nexus has, never had a micro SD slot. So I think Samsung's done the right thing here. Obviously, it increases the price for people who want higher storage versions, but that's kind of the price you pay. And if you want a micro SD slot, there's plenty of other phones like the Moto X Play that I am reviewing right now.
Ooh, segue.
Yeah, so the Moto X Play is actually coming out tomorrow. And so it's a $420 phone, $50 on contract. And every single shortcut that Motorola took to get there is not only understandable, but sort of appreciated. Like, for example, they didn't upgrade the screen to some crazy resolution.
Yeah.
They kept that at 1080p. But the 1080p display is amazing. they changed the metal frame on last year's Moto X to a plastic frame that's covered with a metallic resin. And that sounds dirty, but what it actually means is that the frame is like...
So they spooged metal over top the plastic.
they gave it to a homeless man, and they said...
Whoa! Off the rails! Off the rails!
Sorry.
Hard pass.
Bad form. That was really bad form. This week's program is sponsored by...
Yeah. The Mobile Syrup Swear Jar. So they put a cover on it that feels metallic, and it's got a metallic resin, which means that it hardens the plastic, but it doesn't feel like that sort of Lumia-like polycarbonate. It's more like the iPhone 5C plastic. So doesn't feel like hardened taffy. Okay,
totally.
Gotcha.
So it's nice, and I actually had to be told that it wasn't metal because I really thought it was.
Bader, you're slipping.
I'm slipping.
Okay, so what you're saying is you're talking about compromise that you don't feel bad about, which means Motorola continues its streak of making good mid-range choices on what to improve and what to cut, right? Like, yeah. So that said, and we got a question about the OnePlus 2 as well. So I don't know how we want to do this. So I'm putting you on an island the month of September. With your lovely fiance, and you can take one fiance and one Android phone. What are you taking?
One fiance, huh?
Whoa! God, timeout. Zach Morris timeout. It's off the rails.
I'm such a good joker.
But that being said, no one's gonna remember you saying anything about Star Trek now.
That's true. That's true. So yeah, I will take my beautiful fiance, who I'm getting married to in 35 days. Cannot wait. And I don't know, so on the one hand, like, you haven't set a price. So, if I could go with the most expensive phone, I would go with the Note 5. Even though the Galaxy S6 Edge Plus is more expensive, I don't love the form factor. I think the Note 5 is sort of the perfect combo of flat screen, great ergonomics, good battery life, fast charging, great camera. But my second choice would probably be the Moto X Play. Now, a lot of people are going to probably tell me that the OnePlus 2 is the better choice. And I know Corey Herskew, who's a longtime fan of the SyrupCast. Thanks
Pretty
for
much all of us.
And a fan of all of us. Yeah, I like the OnePlus 2. I have it here. The reason I don't want it at, in my island hovel with my fiance is I just don't trust OnePlus to make great software. So for example, they claim that this device runs stock Android, and it does. It runs very, very kind of low overhead stock Android. But what OnePlus has done is they've made subtle changes in the back end that screw up some of the apps. So when you open a bunch of apps on it, they don't work properly. They don't run because for some reason, OnePlus just decided to mess with the way that certain material design apps are rendered.
How do they screw it? Like, can you give an example specifically?
So yeah, I use Todoist, and Todoist is basically, it's a productivity app that uses themes to change the way that the app looks. But the app, think about it as you have like several layers, and the app is built on a foundation, and then there's just a blank space on that second layer where they insert the colors.
Yeah.
So they just fill in the blanks. So if you choose the normal color, it's red, and there are tons of others like blue and gray and whatever. But somehow the rendering of that second layer doesn't work on the OnePlus 2. And it's not just that app. It's a lot of other apps that use this framework for themes. And it seems like OnePlus basically decided to go their own way. And there's a really detailed Reddit thread that describes how OnePlus is screwed with people. And as much as I enjoy the hardware side, the experience I had with the OnePlus One would lead me to indicate that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that OnePlus just doesn't have control over when it comes to software. And they just haven't impressed me as much on the software side as they have on the hardware side. So it's a great phone. I'm reviewing it now as well, and I would recommend it to people who have an invite and who can get one. But like pound for pound, I would go with the Moto X Play. That's just my opinion. Also, the Moto X Play has a better camera, which I love. And finally, Motorola has made a phone with a good camera. Finally.
Summer shootout teaser.
Well, I did a Moto X Play versus Galaxy S6 camera shootout, and I wanted to do a lot more. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do one.
More shooting. That's what we need.
Shoot with cameras, not with guns. What else should we talk about?
I know you had a hard stop, so we can hit something quick.
Let's kind of finish the pod on a bit of a carrier focus.
Okay.
We came upon some documents that show Rogers and Fido will launch Wi-Fi calling on iPhones running iOS 9. So that's some really interesting stuff, because that's something that Rogers promised back in iOS 8, and for some reason didn't follow through with it. But Wi-Fi calling is really useful. It's really useful for a number of reasons. And it's mostly for people who have bad reception, in basements or, thick-walled apartment buildings. And it's
just basically carrier-level voice over IP.
Yeah, but it's seamless. So instead of having to hand off your phone call from, Rogers One number to, the cellular network, it does it for you automatically. It's cool. I mean, it's not a huge feature, but it's definitely cool. The other thing is that Rogers and Shaw co-announced that Show Me will be coming to Canada for all anybody with an internet subscription, not just Rogers and Shaw customers, today. So you can actually sign up today anywhere in Canada, if you're on TELUS, if you're on Bell, if you're on Tech Savvy, Akinak,
SaskTel,
PharmaPlus.
Wow. Yeah, that's so. I don't know.
Kind of neat. Whatever.
I think I think the way that the CRTC had been wagging its finger in the past, this was likely going to be a reality. It's just interesting to see, because we got the inside juice, the dirt on Show Me, like basically this time last year, wasn't it?
No, it was like late October, early November.
No, it was still summertime, man.
Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry, they announced it in August.
Yeah,
it became available in November.
Yeah. So I feel it's interesting that, from that conversation where they were just so tight-lipped and hard about who the intended customer was for and their focus, that a year later it's all for one and one for all, I think is very interesting.
Yeah, and I don't think it would have been that way if the CRTC hadn't given them incentive to do it.
Definitely.
We can finish off talking a little bit about Kik. Now, Kik is the latest chat company to be valued at over $1 billion, and that's after a $50 million investment from Tencent, which is the Chinese company that runs WeChat. Now, you wrote about this. What is WeChat, and why should we care that Kik has that investment now?
So WeChat is basically like one of the dominant chat apps in the non-Western world.
In China specifically.
Yeah, specifically in China. And the reason why that matters is not that they're just a chat app, but it's a chat app that acts as a service gateway for all these real life components because everyone uses it as the chat app. So basically, and Ted Livingston, who's the CEO of Kik, and I think their CTO, I'm going to say Chris Best, have talked about this around the funding, where they were, when they met with the WeChat people, they saw how in China, basically everything that you could pay for in real world has a component where you can scan that thing and engage through the payment purchasing of that through WeChat. Things like ordering a specific item of food where you're like given the menu option in the chat app and you're writing out what you want and then you get that and pay for it, to maybe filling out a quick survey through WeChat to get a discount on a product, where it just becomes this first interaction space for all these retail components and services, which makes it amazingly dominant in a way that we just don't see here in North America, in a way that apps like Facebook and others have tried to be, but just don't. So when Kik was looking to, I think a few months ago, they had hired a firm based out of San Francisco to do some due diligence on like what their options are. Everyone took that as a signal that they were looking to sell. They were not necessarily looking to do that, but we're recommended, like, why don't you partner with this massive chat app that is looking to do what you're looking to do, because Kik has experimented greatly over the years with doing services on top of or facilitated by chat, which is interesting because Kik started as not a chat app, but a music-based app. That it seemed like a natural fit for both companies, that they could kind of cross-leverage their mutual interests. Kik could become the WeChat of the West, and there's no real competition because they're just two entirely different markets. It's also interesting that the type of companies that Kik is going against are companies like Facebook, right? So it's a Canadian company taking a really, really big swing and thinking global in a way that most don't, and thinking about mobile and chat apps in a way that we don't really see here in the West. As things devolve to emoji and GIF keyboards, they're thinking about a way. I was kicking with Ted the other day. I'm like, yo, find a way that I can use Kik to unlock the door to my apartment instead of stumbling for my keys, and you will win, sir. Let me use, if you're going to become the dominant app interface for everything, because it's easy to just type something in a chat window, in the same way that we would much rather have all of our inter-office communication through Slack than through email or anything else. That's not something pretty much anyone else in the West is trying to do. So right. Very, very cool news. And yes, so the most recent company, which makes them a unicorn or a narwhal, depending on your perspective, which from the Canadian startup perspective is exciting.
Yeah, Kik's done some cool stuff. I mean, I don't use it because it's basically just a haven for spammers at this point for my username, because I started using it back when it launched in 2010. So I think my username has basically been spread around the spam world. And I mean,
your username is the town bicycle.
It's definitely one of them, yeah. But that's okay, because I respect what Kik's doing. And I appreciate that they're trying to disrupt a very, very difficult to disrupt market. And They're doing it from Canada. They're not moving to San Francisco. They're staying put, and they're continuing to grow the startup ecosystem in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Well, I don't know. We went pretty long and hard last week about BlackBerry not being a Canadian company anymore, which several BlackBerry employees since then have just said to me, yeah, we totally feel that. But Kik is also a company where, yes, they're very much headquartered in Kitchener-Waterloo, but they are building in San Francisco and globally. But I think more on the sales and partnerships and services side.
You have to. I mean, so much of its user base is based in the US, right?
Well, and all the brands are located there, right? So you got to go where the partnerships and the money is. And Kick said that they're going to be using the money to either partner with services or even develop some of their own services. But the one thing you're talking about, I think, is really interesting, is the idea that for a company like Kick to take this on, they have to kind of become omnipresent, right? Like everyone has to be using Kick for it to really, in much in the same way that Apple can launch Apple Pay and it instantly becomes important because 50% of mobile users are using Apple devices. There has to be a big enough installed base of Kick users. And I feel like Kick is very much an app that generationally does not resonate with anyone of a certain age. And I know, Ted will come at me for that, but I don't see like my dad using Kick in a way that he might use other, like not WeChat. What do we use all the time?
Well, I use
the one app, WhatsApp. Like I was able to get him to use WhatsApp, and that was a Herculean struggle. But can Kick broaden its appeal and its brand so that it is kind of like a Facebook Messenger, kind of like de facto standard, or what BBM was back in the day? Right.
But what's interesting to me is that, and I think we'll end here, Snapchat, in my eyes, has completely changed from being this, puerile dick pic sharing, ephemeral, platform to something a lot more important, because a lot of my friends use it. And because of that, I open Snapchat every day now, and I've nary sent a dick pic in my life. Like I use it to check up on my, well, not to you anyway, because you haven't earned it. But, I don't check Snapchat, to send individual photos to people. I use it to update my story. I see my friends' stories. I subscribe to a lot of really cool companies. Like The Verge has a really interesting daily update that they have been using to amazing effect. Yeah. And
which will now be on Mashable, because Mashable hired away the guy doing that, Sam Schiefer.
Well, yeah, that's true too. But also, I've had a lot of really interesting conversations about how brands are using Snapchat to grow their audience. And this is a platform that sits completely independent to many of the media properties' web pages, right? Like you could just watch The Verge on Snapchat and not visit their website and have a completely different interaction with that media property.
It is its own medium almost.
It is. It's become very interesting. And I mean, we're doing the same with Periscope. I've been periscoping the shit out of these phone launches, and we're getting 800, 1,000 viewers. Some of, most of them have never heard of Mobile Syrup. Like most of them are from countries that would never even think to check a Canadian site.
Totally.
So, for me, it's really interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. We just rezzed out there. But no, I completely agree that if Kick, for Kick to succeed in executing this strategy, they have to have that sort of like Snapchat level of ubiquity, which even Snapchat is just now starting to obtain, and is I don't know if it's limited or it's a benefit that it is so its own medium in a way that chat is more ubiquitous. I think it's really interesting, but like kudos for them to be, I remember back when they were just like a BlackBerry app getting sued by BlackBerry, and that was the most important thing to know about Kick, or like, all the weird stories about like, it's just a app for like 13-year-old kids. Like, so what they've been able to accomplish here in Canada, and what they continue to attempt to accomplish, is really impressive.
Well, kudos to both companies.
Everybody's a winner on this podcast.
We love you, and we love you. Shout outs to Nate Best. Thanks again for tuning in. Corey Herskew, we appreciate your many questions.
Yeah, I don't think we answered any, but whatevs.
Shout outs to Igor for being the best damn newsy that we could ask for. And shout out Jeff Broussard for changing your avatar back.
He did it? Yeah. Did it. What's going on, buddy?
That's it for this week. Tune in next week when we talk about me watching Star Wars for probably only the third time because I'm going to have to do it this weekend.
Maybe some iOS and iPhone and BlackBerry slider news.
Well, I'm actually recording Fresh Fruit right after this with our bud Eric Lehman, so that's all about iOS. And if you want to hear me chatting about that stuff, I just wrote an awesome iOS 9 preview, if I do say so myself. And if you haven't checked that out, it's on the front page. If you haven't checked out our gift guides, there are 3 of them: phones, tablets, and wearables. We just put a lot of work into that. Shout out to Matt Monas for hooking us up with some awesome videos. And
because school is not a gift, but these phones can be.
That's true. Thanks again, Douglas. You're the best. And we will see you next week. Peace.
Bye, Internet.